is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 839. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your limited resources. Join me on the line all the way from Las Vegas, Nevada. It's Paul Cheon. Paul, welcome back to the show.
Hey, it's good to be back. Been playing a ton of Lorwyn over the past couple of weeks, so excited to share my thoughts on the format.
Yeah, Luis couldn't make it this week. One and even more of his children were sick and required going to the doctor. And then, one parent has to be at the doctor, one at home with the other kids. And that is not really doable, to get a show done. So we've got Paul on. We are going to have him on anyway. We just get the full Cheon experience today. We're going to be talking, of course, Lorwyn Eclipsed. Paul and I just covered the Pro Tour over the weekend. There was a Arena Direct or whatever they call them now, the Win-a-Box thing on Arena. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to get Paul's take on the format as a whole, kind of big picture stuff, what decks he's been liking and all of that. Before we do, I want to say thank you to each and every person who supports us on Patreon. If you'd like to join us, patreon.com/limited resources. And we really appreciate everybody who supports us there. It keeps the show going and it means a lot to us. Also, Ultimate Guard. You can check out their full line of products at ultimateguard.com or your favorite local game store or online retailer. They make the best stuff, right? Like if you're looking for really high quality sleeves, deck boxes, binders, backpacks, things to protect your cards, your decks, and your collection, Ultimate Guard is the place to go. It's one of those companies that's like, they get it. They really understood the market they were trying to hit. And when they designed these things, they said, we want to make these with premium materials, with really well thought out designs. And that's what you get from Ultimate Guard. So if you need to pick up a deck box, whether it's like just, kind of their normal unbranded, just it's a color and it does the job, or if you want to get one that has artwork from some of your favorite IPs on it, they have that too. And again, you can check them out at ultimateguard.com. Thank you, Ultimate Guard. We do appreciate it. One of the perks that you get for being a Patreon supporter, we have a bunch of little stuff, just to kind of make it cool. You get to see a behind the scenes recording of the show live that you can join, and you can chat with us and stuff like that. Which, did I actually post that? Yes, I did. And just to make sure our patron supporters can actually find us there. It also, it's on YouTube. It's streamed on YouTube. So it's live if you happen to be there. But if you're not, you'll still see the link and you can watch it after. And, me and Jeff and Paul, Luis, whoever's on, will be chit-chatting before the show and a little bit after. And you can see that stuff too. But another thing you get is you get to ask questions on our Patreon question of the week thread, where we do the Q&A show most set cycles, but this one's like kind of a more evergreen, like we do one of these per show. And we get a lot of different types of questions, mostly Magic related. This one comes from Larry, who says, "Hi. Thank you for the opportunity to ask questions." You bet, Larry. Thanks for the support. I'm a newish player, a little less than a year of drafting, and I try to follow Cab's theory when drafting. However, I'm confused where draw spells fit into this. I understand that card draw attached to a decent body is good, but where do pure card draw spells fit? And that's a great question, Larry, especially when you're in that stage of your development where you're starting to branch out. Because, the truth is that Cab's theory, which is cards that affect the board state, right, is a way to, there's two main uses for it. One of them is kind of a palate cleanser. If you're having a hard time finding your way through a format and you're trying all this different stuff and you're doing these build arounds and you're trying all these different cards and they're just not working for you, this is a way that you can kind of reset. And it's the idea is that every card in your deck, every spell in your deck is either a creature, a removal spell, and then in some cases like a combat trick. So these are only things that affect the board directly. You're not playing anything else like cards like card draw spells and things like that. None of these like cute build arounds. None of these like, well, if you get this, this, and this, then you get this bonus. None of that stuff. And what that does is, especially if you're in Larry's seat, is it helps you focus on what matters most in Limited. So this is a very useful tool to do that. But this is not optimal drafting. This is pushing things to a little bit more of an extreme so that you can kind of get back to basics and then build back out from there. And where Larry's at right now as being a newer drafter is Larry is now ready to start adding in some of those other things because, again, it is optimal. There are different types of cards that you do want to add to your deck that will increase your win rate, but that don't affect the board state directly. A great example of that, Paul, like in this set would be like Gathering Stone, right? Like if you have 13 Merfolk or whatever, and you're like, well, I'm going to be a Cavs drafter and I'm not going to take this Gathering Stone. You're missing out on some equity. That card is excellent and you will win more with it. Paul, how would you approach that? Like if you were coming from a kind of extreme stance of like, I'm going to only do these as a way to refocus my fundamentals, but now I want to start adding in some extra cards that I think will increase my win rate. What types of cards, what would you be looking for if you wanted to take that step?
Yeah, I mean, I think we certainly recognize that, especially for limited gameplay, cards that provide you advantages certainly are super important. 2-for-1s, we like to call it. Even a card like a Divination, for example, 3 mana, draw 2 cards. If in the right deck, you can probably fit a couple of those cards, and in kind of a longer game, that extra card oftentimes will kind of give you a few more percentage points. So I think card advantage spells are just something that, most people, especially the old school players back when all the limited cards were pretty bad, like just being up 2 cards just meant you were probably going to win that game. Magic has, of course, changed a lot. You can get advantages in a lot of different ways now with cards like, you have just cards that return cards from the graveyard, or you have removal spells that kill 2 things. So there's card advantage can come in multiple different ways, but specifically for card draw, I think you do need to be careful about kind of how many you decide to put into your deck. I've fallen for this trap many times where I go, oh, I have 4 copies of Unexpected Assistance. This is great. It's like, oh, I probably played too many copies of this card. So just, I think if you are starting with kind of that baseline theory of, look, I want to play a bunch of cards that affect the board and removal spells, maybe a smattering of tricks, add a card draw spell, maybe 2, but then I wouldn't really push it too much past that, because oftentimes you're just going to have a lot of other cards where you can kind of sink your mana into, right? If you have a bunch of creatures that have activated abilities, if you have a bunch of Gravedigger effects, at that point you don't really need that much card draw because you're just always going to have stuff to do. If you have a bunch of card draw spells and you have a bunch of activated abilities, oftentimes you're going to just find yourself with too much to do with your mana, and that's not necessarily where you want to be.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's what I was going to say too, which is that the 2 things are, as you start to add these things, do it very carefully. Like you're still fundamentally in the right spot in many formats, in many archetypes, if you're heavily creature based. And that the more you start to, I should rewind. One of the reasons that we even came up with Cab Theory in the first place was like, if you go to a local game store and you do a draft and then you just walk around and say, can you guys just lay out your deck for me? I want to see what everybody came up with from the table, right? And they lay out the decks. For the players who are newer, who are less experienced, who aren't as good as the players that have been playing for a long time or that really put a lot of, focused effort into getting better at this, you're going to find that they are way too loose with these cards that if you read them, you're like, well, that seems kind of cool, but a great example of that would be like equipment, right? Sometimes I've seen players in real life, that have 4 equipment on the battlefield and no creatures, right? And it's like they maybe should have run one of those. Like the best one of those probably was good for them, but like the second one was starting to fall off, and the third and fourth were just like, no, like those just need to be bodies, or you're never going to find anything, to equip to, right? And that happens all the time. Things that make your spells cheaper or just pure card draw or anything like that, it adds up really quick. And so you want to be very careful about what you add and kind of covet those slots, like or really like care for those, right? Like if like I mentioned the Gathering Stone thing, like that is one that's worth that slot if you have the deck that supports it. And it's like that you should feel really good about picking up that card and putting it in that spot, but maybe you have one more slot like that. Maybe two. Right. It's really narrow. Like you got to be really, really careful about, how you approach that. So I love that question, Larry. And I think you are ready to start adding them. Where do card draw spells fit? They do fit in many decks, and you should add one, but don't add four. As Paul said, they run out of steam really, really quickly. And, like the term we use for it is air, right? It's like you look at your hand and it's like, I have a lot of air. I can do a lot of stuff. I can spend my mana, but nothing happens. I'm not beating you down. Right. I'm not blocking. I'm not advancing a game plan in particular. And you want to be very, very cognizant of anything that would fit that description, meaning you tap mana and the board, like let's say your opponent has 10 power out and you tap 4 mana. Does it change that? Meaning, do you put out a blocker? Do you remove one of their guys? If the answer is no, you need to be very skeptical of that card and only run, a couple of them in your deck. The downside to cabs, of course, is that it's too narrow. Again, it's not the optimal way to do it. And there are archetypes that don't work this way, right? Modern Limited is a diverse landscape of different designs and everything. And it isn't so simple as, just creatures beat down, whatever. But, like Paul, you and I watched, I wanted to talk a little bit about the PT anyway. I guess we could do it now. But, you and I watched Seth draft. Seth Manfield, he won the world championship. So we watched him draft at this first PT of the season, and he had like a pretty bumpy ride during the actual draft itself. But if you looked at his deck that he submitted, it was very cabsy. It was very just like combat tricks, removal, creatures, curve, let's go. Right. And you could see that he was like in this turbulent environment of a pro tour draft table where, everybody really knows what they're doing and you just don't get gifted these amazing decks. He kind of went back to basics on that too. So, there is something to be said for that, but there are archetypes, that are weird or that are trying to do something different and they don't lend themselves to this. And if you tried to force that through, that wouldn't be the case. So I really like cabs as a starting place and as a palette cleanser. But you do, once you start to outgrow it, that's a good sign. And you can definitely put some of these extra cards.
I will say this. I think a lot of people can perhaps be reminded of cabs theory, even some of the more advanced drafters, because it gets to the point where I'm looking at, even just like people that I speak to about Limited, where I see some of the people of some of the draft decks of the people even in my Discord or whatever. And, these are people who are, people who watch Limited draft videos every day who kind of understand Limited, but they're still playing too many colors, not respecting their mana curve, playing too many card draw spells. Like these are all kind of common pitfalls that you can run into by trying to get a little bit too fancy with just kind of how you approach the Limited format. At the end of the day, like if you go back to basics and you draft a good mana curve with some interaction, like nothing beats that. The best Limited players that I know prefer to do that.
They do.
We're talking about Seth Manfield, Marcio. These are folks that just like to just draft good curve out decks. Ken Yukuhiro, you just see them draft Boros beatdown almost all the time. And these are the best drafters in the world, right? So if they do it, you don't have to kind of play 3 Changeling Wayfinders and prove how smart you are by playing all these different colors and slow yourself down. Like oftentimes it is better to just kind of find the right lane, draft a good curve, and just kind of, play good tight Magic, and hopefully that gets it done.
No, that's totally true. And we see that over and over. Shuhei drafts that way. Martin Yuza drafts that way. Like some of the, really top tier Limited players in the history of our game, are very, you can go all the way back to like Mike Turian, right? I mean, he was known for that, right? Like these guys want to play curve out. They don't mess around with mana. One of the things that if you watch Paul's videos on his YouTube channel, and you definitely should, there'll be a link in the description for it too. He puts up daily draft videos. And, I think one of the things that stands out, Paul, is when you're building your mana base and when you're selecting your cards, you're very, very wary of double mana spell, like double pip cards, something that costs red or white. Even if it's like, basically up until at least the 4-drop slot, like if it costs, red at the 2-drop, that's obviously kind of oppressive, but like 1 red or 2 red, like you're very aware of it. Like you might cut it, right? If your mana, even though you're playing like 8 red sources, you might be like, I really want my mana to be super smooth, and I'm just going to put in this common over it. I'm not giving up a bomb here or whatever. But those are considerations that you're making all the time. And if you watch, people draft that are like less disciplined than that, I mean, they're just throwing those in because they're like, I'm red, it's red, I'm playing it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
That's another good fundamental thing. So discipline, Larry, you got it. Let's do a crack-a-pack, Paul. And of course, as usual, we'll use this not just as a way to figure out what we would take, but as a jump-off discussion starter. Okay, our first card up, Dream Caesar. 3. This is a foil. It's 3 and a black for a 3/2 flyer, and when it enters, you can blight 1, and if you do, target opponent or each opponent, I guess, discards a card.
Yeah, I actually thought this card had the potential to be a pretty solid card on the format, depending on kind of the speed of the format, but it's actually been kind of an underperformer for me personally, just in draft. I think creature types always matter in this format, so having a card that has an okay effect, but it's creature type fairy, certainly doesn't do it any favors. If it was a goblin or something like that, or even an elf, of course, I think it would be much, much better. But yeah, this is something that almost never makes my decks.
Yeah, same. And, I'm getting more and more annoyed, by the fact, I don't understand the fundamental design principle on this set. I don't know enough about game design to get my head around it fully, but just the idea that we have like an ostensibly playable fairy here, and this is not the only one. There are actually quite a few, but just in an unsupported archetype. Like it's just blue-black just is not, like there are cards that are hybrid blue-black, and you got trapped by that the triple hybrid uncommon, and it's like these
3 of those.
Right, and they're good cards. Like Dream Caesar is a totally fine card, but like you said, you're just so not incentivized to put off type creatures in your deck that I'm just like, why is this here? Like it feels like filler, or like they got halfway down the road on making a cool fairies deck, and then we're like, we'll just stop here, put these cards in, and focus on these other archetypes. And also, like, I don't know what the decision points were about, which ones we should focus on or whatever. It feels disheveled.
I actually feel like if they wanted to just kind of shoehorn a bunch of off creature type cards for people to play, you should actually make them stronger. Right. So it's like, this doesn't fit one of my kindred types, but because the card is so good, it's a card that I would be interested in playing in any of my black decks. Right. Let's say this was a 3/3 flyer, just like little knobs to make it so that this is just a good card by itself, because, it being a fairy really takes away a lot from it. If it was a changeling even, right? Like obviously that would be fantastic. So yeah, I think that the big miss here is probably the creature type. And also just, there's just, now while the speed of the format isn't fast necessarily, you still kind of need to, the board matters, right? And so to some degree, and this obviously doesn't really give you the best stats. Right.
It's just a weird pull, and what you said is totally true. Coming off of the set review, I had the same feeling where I was like, well, if it's not an on-type creature, then it needs to stand up on its own. It needs to be good enough to be the exception and say, well, I feel good about playing this, which basically means it needs to be at like an uncommon power level. So all the basically none of the commons have held up. Like they're, even though again, you read them, that's a perfectly good card. It's just, they can't. And so then we play cards like this next one, which is like not very exciting. It's Feisty Spikeling, the one in a red-white hybrid for a 2/1 changeling. And during your turn, it has first strike, but it's like the only thing, I shouldn't say that. There's 2 things that matter about the card, and the rest is really like whatever. And it's like, it's a changeling, and that it has, 2 colors in its type so that it can get you a little vivid boost every once in a while. But really, it's just like, it's a changeling. That's what this is. It because like the 2/1 first strike isn't really very good. Red white is not a deck at all. So it's just changeling.
It's a 2-mana changeling. You kind of put it in your deck. It's if you're aggressive, then it can be okay. So obviously this can fill the role of kind of a 2-mana Kithkin that you could play, but I feel like it's also just worse than the other 2 common Kithkin that you can have at 2. So it's just a completely filler level card. But I think a lot of the multicolored common changelings are like that. They're all totally playable.
Yeah.
Right? Gangly Stompling, Prideful Feastling, they're fine, but it's one of those, oh man, I didn't get enough of my typal card, so I'm going to put a couple of these cards in my deck. Of course, if you do have Vivid Payoffs, then you're more inclined to take cards like this to fill your curve so that you can play, your Shine Strikers for 4 or whatever.
Right. Yeah, and I have an issue with that fundamentally, right? Because like if you told me like these 2 cards are a really good example. They're both common, and like Dream Seizer's interesting. Right? Like it gives you this choice of like, do I want to get a card or do I need to have a bigger flyer? It would be an interesting thing to figure out how it plays out. Is it maybe a little bit of a surprise and you actually just keep it as a 3/2 flyer a lot of the time, or you just always getting the card? And then, how does that change your evaluation? There's a lot of like play to that card where Feisty Spikeling, you just play it. Like there's nothing interesting about it on the battlefield. Right. But what are the incentives in this set? Pick Feisty Spikeling. It's like, okay, what else? Well, I'd really like to play a 2/3 lifelink. Like that's where I'm at in a modern era limited set. I can't wait to get this 2/3 lifelink or a 4/2 trample. It's like, these are boring cards compared to the off-type ones. The giants, they're all interesting. The tree folk are really cool cards. And same with the fairies. And they're the ones I want to play. And I feel like I'm kind of being told, I know that looks cool and it might be interesting and it might even be powerful, but how about a 2/3 lifelink, my friend? I think that's what you really wanted the whole time. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll take the 2/3 lifelink because it says changeling on it. So these are kind of the fundamentals that I'm having an issue with. If you're in creature type, the set plays really well. It's good. Like it's mid-range, it's creature based. I really like that. It feels very kind of core limited vibes to me, which I really like. And each of the core archetypes are diverse, interesting, powerful, at least on some level. There's of course a hierarchy there, but I mean, I'm interested in any of the archetypes if it's open. I like Vivid, there's the things I like. It's just when I open a Dream Seaser, I'm like, well, just ignore it. And
Exactly.
Anyway, Elder Auntie is next 2 and a red for a 2/2 that makes a 2/2 goblin that makes a 1/1 goblin. Goblins kind of sucks a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably the weakest of the 5 main archetypes that you can draft, and certainly this is a filler level card for the goblins deck. What's funny is this would be awesome as a merfolk, just because the blue-white deck just cares so much about convoking things out. So being able to just make 2 bodies on turn 3 to convoke would be really nice. But of course, it's red, so it's not quite as good there. So I mean, just again, filler level card. If you're not goblins, you generally don't play this card.
Right, and I would say that this is in some ways a victim of the goblins deck overall, not really translating, just not really quite being powerful enough. Because if you told me name any type and I can pay 3 mana for 3 power, 3 toughness over 2 bodies, both of that type, I'm in. Right. Like it double triggers stuff. It increases your count on board by 2, it counts as casting 1. It counts as one in the yard.
It would be insane as a Kithkin or a Merfolk. Right. Like both. It's just at its worst as a goblin. The thing is, I mean, look, the goblins deck is actually not really an aggro deck anymore. It's kind of a mid-range drain you out deck. It really relies heavily on some of those uncommons that has those drain effects. So, you have the Elder Auntie, you blight into the token, you drain them a few times. Yeah. That is kind of the path to draft that deck. The issue is if you kind of move into this archetype without a lot of those signpost uncommons, and you try to put together a goblins deck with just a bunch of commons, you're going to be in some trouble. That's
right. Next one is another goblin. It's Chaos Spewer. This is 2 and a black-red hybrid for a 5/4. And as it enters, you can either blight 2 or pay 2 mana. You get to choose.
This is going to be a common theme, but I think this is a general sentiment that a lot of people feel is This format is largely defined by its uncommons and its rares. The commons, there's just so many of them that are kind of like this, just kind of bleh, like just a bunch of unexciting changelings that you kind of play to fill your deck, but you're never really super happy about playing. And this kind of falls into that category too, where you kind of play this if you're a goblins deck and you care about blighting onto things. If you have some tree folk, yeah, that's even sweeter, I guess, but certainly not something you take early.
Right. And, I just checked the current 17 lands data on the color pairs, and they're really consistent. They've stayed the same. And it's basically like elves is 58% and change. Then it's Kithkin, which is 57% and change. And then it's merfolk, which is 56% and change. And then it's elementals, which is 55%. So you see this kind of nice progression. And then unfortunately, it is the goblins deck, which is 53%. So it goes 58, 57, 56, 55, 53. It is a significant batch below. That is a meaningful, amount below. And speaking of, our next card is another goblin. It's Vile Boggart, which is really hard to say on coverage. Paul and I found out as people were playing
Vile Boggart. Yeah, definitely hard to say on coverage. Yeah, look, this is just a card that if you're not goblins, you're just not going to start either. It can be a fine sideboard card, especially against maybe a Kithkin deck or a Merfolk deck that has the ability to make some 1/1 tokens. But yeah, just another filler card.
And that's, by the way, the black 1/1. And then when it dies, you could put a +1/+, or -1/+1 counter on a creature. Next up is Flame Chain Mauler. This one always feels like a little without home. This is the 1 in a red 2/2 elemental. You can pay 1 in a red to give it +1/+0 and menace until end of turn. It's kind of an aggressive creature. And when I'm playing the elementals deck, that isn't really what I'm looking for. I am looking for 2-drop elementals, but it's interesting when you look at the 2-drop commons for this deck. The red one is this pump, fire breathing menace guy. And the other one's a 1/3 that when it dies, you draw a card. It's just begging to block. Right. And this one is kind of the opposite. And I think I lean a little bit more towards the other end here. Where are you at on the Flame Chain Mauler?
Yeah, I don't think I've drafted too many very aggressive elemental type decks. So this is just something that kind of falls into your lap in kind of the later part of the pack. If you need a 2-drop, you'll put it in your deck. You won't be super happy about it. And yeah, I mean, the elementals that kind of struggles in the 2-mana slot, I think compared to a lot of the other color combinations, because this is one of them. And even the Summit Sentinel, sometimes you can kind of overdo it and it just kind of stays in play. And if you can't cash it in for a card, sometimes you're like, man, this thing's just not even doing anything. So yeah, I don't love the 2-drops in the elementals deck, but I do think the Summit Sentinel, the blue one, is a little bit better for that strategy than the Flame Chain Mauler.
And it's so different. Yeah. And I mean, seriously, how many times have you activated that? It's just not a place that you want to put your mana very often. Speaking of, next is Aquatex Defenses. This is another card that just kind of, where does it go? Because, one of the things that we talk about that's similar to what we were talking about with Cabs, but it's a little bit different for these Kindred sets or whatever, which is, anytime you're putting a card into your deck that isn't of the creature type that you care about, it really has to pull its weight. If it either isn't that or doesn't care about that, right? Like it's not a goblin or a card that says blah, 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 based on the number of goblins you have or whatever, then it's like, these cards need to be really good. You need to be getting serious card advantage or some other thing out of them. And, this is a perfect example of one that's not even close. It's just not even, in the ballpark of what it needs to be doing. It's the 1 in a blue flash aura for your creature. It gets +1/+2. And when it enters, the enchanted creature gets hexproof. Basically, it's like a mostly defensive card. You do get +1 power, so it can be a combat trick. But, along the lines of what I was just saying, combat tricks also need not apply unless they're kind of premium, combat tricks or you're really on the beatdown plan.
Yeah, I think one of the big misses in this set is just the combat tricks in general. They have not really been pulling their weight. There's just no good 1-mana trick. Appeal to Erdu is not a very good card.
No, you have to get to uncommon. You have to get to blossoming defense.
Blossoming defense is like the one that you want, right. And then perhaps the green one is okay. The +2/+0 trample indestructible.
Yeah,
Leaf
that
ambush. I
has
think
its moments. I agree.
sometimes you can get some damage through,
Yeah.
but yeah, I feel like I feel like we needed a 1 mana combat trick somewhere in the aggressive colors, and they kind of just have it all at 2 mana. And with the removal being as good as it is, they just have not been doing well.
This next card I like a lot. I think it's a little, I don't know, maybe a little underrated, a little overlooked for what it is. It's Safe Right Cavalry. This is the 3 and a green 4/4 elf warrior that can't be blocked by more than one creature, and you can pay 5 to have target elf you control get +2/+2. So it's an elf. It can also target other elves. But man, I kept finding myself being really annoyed by this card. And at some point it crossed the threshold from annoying to just good. Just like, no, this card's a pain. Like, it's got 4 toughness. It needs to die at some point. And, we talk about a concept called threat of activation, on the show a lot, which is like a card that has an activated ability that you don't need to activate for it to be relevant. And this is a really good example of that. If your opponent has a 5/5, you can just attack with your Safe Right Cavalry. And they're like, well, I can't really block it because you could just pump it up and get to eat my creature for free. So they don't. And then you go, okay, take 4. And then you spend your mana elsewhere. And that's a big advantage. Like, that threat really matters. And, many creatures that have activated abilities, they're not threatening in that way. But this one really is. And it is a pain to deal with, because if you want to block it, you need a huge creature. And if they have multiple elves, which of course they do, now you're just like, combat becomes an absolute nightmare against this thing, because they can pop up a different elf, and punish you for a different block.
Yeah, I hope like Wizards, when they design green 4-drops and above, they kind of look at this as a really great example of kind of what you need at this point from a 4-mana creature to actually have it do something. Back in the day, of yesteryear, a 4-mana 4/4, we're like, oh yeah, I guess I'll put that in my deck. It's nice and beefy, and that is just way, way below the bar. Yeah. And now we're in a world where we have a 4-mana 4/4 in the strongest archetype that is basically unblockable, that also can pump all your other elves, and it's performing at roughly kind of an average level common in that archetype, right? So like, this is how good a 4+ drop needs to be to actually have it be something that you could consider taking over another C+ level common, right? This is how you need to push it. So I hope they continue doing stuff like this to make it so that these big green creatures are desirable, right? Like they did a really great job with Migrating Ketrodon in the past. That card was huge, right? And that one did a lot of work. It needs to be at that power level, just like a 4-mana 4/4 that, I don't know, scries 1 or something like that. That's just not going to get it done anymore. I think they did a pretty good job with this card. And yeah, I do like having this in my elves decks. It is a little bit awkward though, at least specifically for the elf decks, because the 2 best commons, or they're both 4-drops, like 2 of the good ones. Like, you have Dawnhand Eulogist and Safe Right Cavalry, both of which kind of utilize the same point in the curve, and you really can't kind of overdo it in the 4-mana slot, which is why I don't take this as highly as I probably should. If this was a 3-drop, or if the Eulogist was a 3-drop, I think I would see myself taking this a lot higher. But because they're both 4s and they're both premium commons in that color combination, I tend to focus on the Scarbleed Scouts, the Midnight Tillings, the cheaper things I can do in the elf decks.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I totally agree with you, Paul, that like, we almost need to put a caveat on it. Like, it's like, for a 4-drop or for a 5-drop, this actually gets the job done. Right? Because we're automatically skeptical of all 4s and 5s, because they're not, you only need a few of them in your deck. So you can be very picky. Also, it's pretty common to have the upper rarity cards, particularly the bombs. It's very rare that those only cost 1 or 2 mana. Right? There's not that many pack rats, but you know what there are? There's a heck of a lot of 5-mana, 5/5 flying, blah, 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 blahs out in the world, right? And when you only need 2 or 3 of those in your deck total, cards like these 4s and 5s at common have to really overperform, but this one does. Like, this is a card that, like, this and the Eulogist are, I mean, it's a little bit of a shame that they're both in the same archetype, that they kind of got it over the finish line in that way. But this is a type of card I really, really like. at the 4 if I'm going to play, for the 4s I need to play. Next is Gold Meadow Nomad. This is the white 1/2 Kithkin, and when you can pay white and exile it from your graveyard to make a 1/1 green and white Kithkin at sorcery speed.
Yeah, it's just if you in like a super ideal Kithkin deck with all the payoffs, maybe, but if you just have like a smattering of them, it's just the body is just not quite good enough here. There's just too many ways to kind of brick wall this. There's so many life linkers that exist in this format too, where just a 1-mana 1/2 just probably doesn't cut it most of the time.
Right. It's funny, the place I've actually found myself putting this the most is if I'm Merfolk that is heavy on Convoke but light on Curve. Yeah. I will put a Gold Metal Nomad because it looks more like a Llanowar Elf, in a deck like that. And it's like, it is a tough pill to swallow to put a relatively low power level off type card in your deck. But Convoke draws with a 1-drop, they're dumb. Like that is dumb mode. So I will occasionally do that. Uncommons. First one is Bark of Doran. This is the 1 and a white equipment. Equip cost is 1. The creature gets +0/+1, and as long as the creature's toughness is greater than its power, it assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. This is another good one of what we were talking about with like cabs, and then in this set that you need everything to be on type. Like there's just no room. I mean, I would say there's no room in the format for Bark of Doran.
Yeah, it's like equipment are just generally not that great anyways, and then the fact that this is a very conditional way to beef up your creatures, I just don't think it's worth it. I have never put it. I think I've had one opponent cast this card against me.
I have too.
And so it's just not. Yeah, just don't take it. If you draft this entire format and never take this card and play it, it'll probably be better for you overall. That's right.
Yeah, and this is another nod to the like, why is this here? Like, this is a tree folk payoff or something. It's just like, what? Anyway, next one is Mudbutton Curse Tosser. This is the black 2/1 as additional cost to cast it. You behold a goblin or pay 2. It cannot block, but when it dies, destroy target creature an opponent controls with power 2 or less. I've actually found my way around this card more often than I thought. It does look very annoying. Like, kind of it's going to trade for something or they're going to blight onto it. Like there's a lot of, it made my imagination go when I saw it, but playing against it a bunch, I'm like, nah, I don't know. I respect it, but I'm not like, I'm certainly not thinking about taking it here. And it doesn't, I don't know, it hasn't really stood out to me as being very good. What do you think?
I mean, you 100% have to play this in your goblins decks, of course,
for sure.
And if you put it in the right goblin deck, I mean, it's like a very, very good Bile Vile Boggart, I suppose, if you think about it. We're just, it's not just mana value 2. The fact that it kills anything with power 2 certainly helps because you can actually trade up and kill some bigger things. It combos really well with Gristle Glutton, which is probably one of the best commons that you want to pick up in these goblin decks. So if you can put together a good goblin shell with some blight effects, I think this is a totally fine card. I mean, the cards that we've seen so far have been fairly weak. I think it's between this and Safe Ride Cavalry right now.
Yeah, you really brought the bad pack with
pack.
You, Paul. Like, what's the deal? These are like terrible. Let's see if it'll get better. Next one is Dose of Dawn Glow. This is the 4 and a black instant. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. If it isn't your main phase, you blight 2. But I mean, you can get back a full-powered creature and blight somewhere else and block.
Yeah, but the thing is, this format's just not about large monsters, right? You just don't see that many people playing 5, 6, 7 drops. You don't have even the land cyclers, right? That's like a cool combo where you land cycle something, and then for 5 mana, you get it back. You get a Slavering Branch Snapper in play for 5 mana. You really did it. You got your discount here. So, like if... I think this is the type of card that you would maybe consider playing in an elf deck that has bombs, lots of self-mill, and no other ways to get recursion, right? Usually you're going to have an Unbury. Sometimes you'll have a Dawnblessed Pennant. You'll have something. So usually you don't want to play a card like this. But look, if you have 2 high perfect Morcants in your deck and a lot of self-mill, then maybe you can find a way to put this in your deck, but certainly not a first pick worthy card.
Yeah, and it would be nice to pick it up late. Right, where like you happen to find yourself in that triple bomb situation and you're like, and you're elves and you're milling yourself and it all just kind of comes together and then, you pick it up 11th and you're like, cool, like this is the spot where I want this. Our rare, will it save us? No, I don't think it will. It's Hexing Squelcher. It's 1 and a red for a 2/2 Goblin Sorcerer. It can't be countered. It has Ward, pay 2 life. Spells you control can't be countered. Other creatures you control have Ward, pay 2 life. You know, I was talking about Safe Right Cavalry in this framing of like, it went from my perspective, went from that's kind of annoying to like, no, that's just good. Does Hexing Squelcher cross that line? Like, it's definitely annoying. Is it good?
I don't think so. I think this is there's a couple of cards in this format that look really good, but are actually mostly traps. And I think this is one of them. It's a 2. You're like, okay, 2 mana, 2/2 rare symbol, a crap ton of text.
Yeah.
None of it really matters because guess what happens? You have a 2 mana, 2/2 creature in play, right? Literally no text, right? This could be a feisty spikeling for all I care about, right? So it's the reason why it's just not a good card is because at the end of the day, it's just straight up a 2 mana 2/2, and it makes it a little bit annoying for your opponents to kill the creatures that they want, right? But like, what are we looking at in this format? I think this format, I don't know if you guys talked about it previously, but it's just so much of it is about just getting a bunch of creatures in play. Mm-hmm. People are actually having a lot more success with less removal spells in this format and really leaning into, you know, the creature types and making sure that you have a critical mass of elves or goblins or what have you. So oftentimes you're playing a deck with 18 creatures, 19 creatures with 3 or 4 removal spells. So what? You're going to maybe deal 2 damage because they killed your bomb goblin, but your 2 mana useless 2/2 is still in play. Like that just happens way too often. Don't even think about putting this in your non-goblin deck, and just first of all, just generally you shouldn't play it in your deck. Another card, I think it's a better card that people tend to overvalue that's very similar to this is Tam Mindful First Year. Now this card looks insane because you're like, oh, 2 mana for a 2/2 tap, this creature gets hexproof from all colors. So everybody just thinks it's a Mother Runes. It's just not. Right? It's a 2 mana 2/2. If your opponent just plays a bunch of creatures and you have this in play, you have a 2 mana 2/2, right? If you have some Vivid Synergies that can do some work, it is definitely not a bomb. Do not first pick it over one of the Signpost uncommons because you are doing yourself a disservice unless you want to draft a Sweet 5 color deck. I mean, I applaud you for doing that, but just again, there are a lot of cards like that exist. And the Squelcher is also just kind of in that bucket.
Yeah, and you know, I would put it in that similar framing as well, where I think that the Squelcher and Tam both hit that level of annoying, but not good, right? Like they're not like really powerful good cards. Tam can be annoying. It really can. It can be, oh, I have to kind of work around this. But at the end of the game, you're like, but I didn't, and I still kind of just won, you know? And it's like the Squelcher too. It's like, well, if I really need to kill it, I can kill it. But like, none of us are like, all right, I've got a handful of 6 removal spells and I'm going to try to 1-for-1 my way out of this. It's like that is not how this format plays out. As far as what we would pick from the pack, I know what I would take. It's an interesting discussion though, because there's the Safe Right Cavalry, which is, you know, probably the best card here, and it's in the best archetype. But boy, it is way down the list on cards in that archetype. Like this is not, you know, you're not like, I've got the Nut Elves deck, I opened up a Safe Right Cavalry, right? This is not how this works. But I think the best card, you know, is probably Mud Button Curse Tosser, but it's in the worst archetype. But I would take it here because there's an Elder Auntie, a Chaos Spewer, a Bilevar Boggart, there's a Dose of Dawnglow, a Hexing Squelcher, and a Feisty Spikeling, and I'm getting something back that will go into my mediocre Goblins deck. So I would take that here. I think the other option would be Feisty Spikeling and just sort of punt this pick to the next one and, you know, hope you're in the color. Or I think you could go with the Safe Right Cavalry and just be like, well, maybe I'm not in Elves, but like I don't want to be anywhere else that this pack is taking me, so I'll just take a shot. What would you take out of the pack?
I think I would take the Curse Tosser. I think it's like, I think you can defend taking the Safe Right Cavalry. I think those are the 2 clear picks here. I think there's a little more upside with the Curse Tosser if you put together a good Goblins deck with all the Blight synergies, triple Gristle Glutton, all that stuff, and you can get a lot of value that way. So I think you could take that. But of course, Elves is clearly the strongest archetype, so I can also see the case being made that you take the Cavalry. I mean, you can still technically play it in your green-white decks, right? It's just a random creature, but in just a straight-up green-white deck, it's probably more like a replacement level creature that you play in the 4-mana slot, whereas I think Mudbutton Curse Tosser in a solid Goblins deck is above replacement level.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Bad pack though. Like let's be clear here.
Really bad. I was like, is there another uncommon? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, give us something. Yeah, and it is also interesting because of the way that packs are constructed now and play boosters is that like sometimes the uncommons and rares go 6 cards deep, right? And this one was like pure old school, just no bonus sheet, no extra rare, no extra. It was just like, nah, dude, deal with this. So, and we did the best we could with it. I did want to touch on this, Paul. I want to get your big picture thoughts on the format, but before we do, we just covered the PT, where, you know, there were 2 drafts of Lorwyn Eclipsed at the Pro Tour level. You can see them on YouTube now. Paul and I covered both, so you know, we'll kind of walk you through those if you check out those videos. But we also had what has become a bit of a pattern, which is that they did the Arena Direct. Do they still call them Arena Directs?
I think those were maybe. Yes, that might be it.
I think they might be, whatever, the win-a-box things, right? Where you play a sealed, and then they have 2 different versions of it. They have one that's for a collector booster where you have to get to 7 wins before you get your second loss. It's a steep hill to climb. And then they have another version of it where for play boosters, booster boxes, where if you get to 6 wins, you get 1. And if you get to 7 wins, you get 2 of them. And again, before your second loss, or is that third loss? I think it's still second loss. But anyway, and this has happened before where it comes out on the Pro Tour weekend. And of course, Paul and I we're keen, you know, we're down to play a few of these events.
We got a side hustle.
Yeah, exactly. And so we both were playing these between rounds, and, you know, when we got off work for the day, we would go back and jam a few of these. And it was fun. I mean, I really love these events. It took me until the Final Fantasy one to play them. I kind of was like, I didn't really want to play sealed, you know, that much. I do like sealed actually quite a bit, but it was like, do I really want to spend this much time on sealed? And, you know, I don't really want like more Magic product, you know, like I can sell it or whatever, but it's like, it kind of becomes this thing. It's like, I won. And then it's like, I have to wait 2 months, and then some box shows up, and then I have to put it up on eBay or try to find a friend that wants it or whatever. And it becomes a little bit of a thing. But anyway, but it was a Final Fantasy one because the prices on those boxes were absurd, right? They were like $1,200 or something, and they retailed for $4 or $6 or whatever it was. So my poker brain couldn't say no to the EV of those tournaments, but it also opened my eyes to like, this is fun. Like, I like playing these. And so I've played them ever since. And this one was for the Lorwyn Eclipse collector booster. So, you know, those are 350 to 400 worth of cards that you can win. And each entry's 6,000 gems, which is, you know, a little over $30, 33
something
bucks.
Like that.
Yeah.
33, 30. Yeah. Something like that.
So it's like, you know, when you math it out, it's like, well, so if it's just straight value, you know, I can play, you know, 11 or 12 entries or so. And if I win a box out of one of those, then I break even. And if I get it with any more frequency than that, then I'm ahead. And, you know, you can even be a little more generous, and say, you know, if I put together a couple of deep runs, because there are significant gem prizes as you work your way up the wins, where, you know, like, for example, if you make it to 6 wins, but don't quite get the box, you know, you profit gems, like you get a free buy-in or whatever. And so, you know, on top of your original. So there, you know, if you say, well, I'm pretty good and I'll probably pick up some gems in my 10, 12, you know, runs, you know, maybe it ends up being 13 or 14, you know, that you get out of a full run of buy-ins for the prize, you know, that you need to win to get to 7 on one of those to break even. That's pretty good. I mean, you know, if you play a lot of limited like Paul and I do, you're definitely plus EV to do it. So we were jamming those all weekend. What was your take on the sealed format and on that, you know, on your adventure trying to win the boxes.
Yeah, the coverage team as a whole, as a team, we were trying to, I think Monty DeVuti was setting the line. I think he set the line a little ambitiously at 13.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the total tally, we ended up winning 12 boxes. We actually got kind of close. So 12 boxes while commentating a full Pro Tour. Yeah, I mean, we spent a lot of evenings just jamming games, but it was a lot. And, look, at the end of the day, despite the format, despite the format, these things are always fun to play just because that feeling of winning a box and you're winning in is always just a great feeling. It doesn't matter. But
there were high fives all around when anybody won a box.
For sure. There were, I bubbled out of one, but we'll ignore that one.
We're going to talk about that one too. We're definitely
tilt. Okay, well, fine. We'll talk about that later. But I will say this format was a little bit rough because every now and then, I think it just so much of it just kind of comes down to how many of the good Kindred cards you opened within the same Kindred type, right? It's like if you open one of each Eclipse card, that's not what you want. But if you open 2 or 3 Eclipse Elves, all of a sudden you have like a bonkers deck. And so, oftentimes in Sealed previously, you can kind of get a little bit creative with your mana bases, splash, and maybe play some bombs of a bunch of different colors. But this format was a little bit weirder in the sense that a lot of the bombs are also caring about your Kindred types in some way, where you have a champion of the whatever, right? And you just can't play it because you don't have enough elves for your champions of the perfect. You can't splash it, even if you have the mana to do so. So that made it kind of difficult to just kind of put together a soupy deck and have a lot of success. Now, you can still do it for sure. It just felt like it was a little bit more difficult to pull off. So I've had a lot of pools that were just straight up blanks, where I opened 6 boosters and I go, well, I mean, I had so many 1 and 2 and even some number of 0 and 2 finishes in this pool, more so than I haven't had in others, where it's like, I feel like my win rate was still probably the same, but it was a lot spikier, where I would open these pools that just had 5 goblins and no changelings, and I go, okay, well, all my good cards are black and red, but I only have like 6 goblins or whatever, and it just can't come together, and I just kind of scrub out of those. Or I have the most insane goblin deck ever that's got Grub's Command and Grub and that recursion loop and a bunch of removal, and everything looks awesome, and I do really, really well. So yeah, I would say that the Seal deck was a little bit rough. I mean, personally, I know some people love Sealed, but personally for me, I'm more of a draft. I heavily prefer draft to Sealed, but of course you can only play in Sealed. So, I still enjoyed it for what it was, but this was a tough format to, I think I spent $400 worth of gems. Like, that's a lot of entries, because that was a lot of 1-2 and 0-2 flameouts. But ultimately, I still ended up winning 4 boxes. So I still profited from the exchange. It was like basically getting 4 boxes for the price of 1, but that was a lot of entries.
Yeah. I think I spent about the same as you and won half the boxes. So I won 2 boxes. So I think I was up still, I maybe doubled my entry, but that was a lot of work over, I was, playing quite a bit. And I mean, it is a different mode. Like I know that it's when we're in between rounds, I'm playing and I'm focusing on it, but like I'm also working and I'm thinking about the next round. And if anything comes up, it's like the priority shifts. It's like, oh, you're in the booth. It's like, well, I'll try to finish my game, but I'm not gonna. I got to get prepped up for the next round. So I'm accepting up front that I'm gonna have to give up some mind share and maybe even a few games to just the fact that I'm working and I'm, I mean, we're on break when we're doing it, but like the nature of coverage is that like when a round ends, you're up, right? And so, and you don't get to know exactly when that is. And maybe you have a really slow opponent or it takes extra long and you just have to say, well, I just got to scoop this one up or make some crazy plays just to try to finish the game real quick or whatever. But then, when we're off, we'd go out to eat or whatever, go back to the hotel room, and then we're then I can actually focus on it. Of course, the downside then is that I'm tired, right? Because doing commentary is a tough job and it takes a lot of mental focus and even some physical stuff. And it's like very, draining profession. And so then it's like, well, am I really playing my best? Like, probably not, but close enough. I'm able to, I would get a good 2-3 hours of like focus play in, and that should be enough. But yeah, I ended up winning 2, and it was exactly what you said. They were both, I'm sad about it because, I get I'm really proud when I can find a deck that didn't really look like it could win a box, and I can get there with it. I can find just the right build and kind of a game plan and like maybe a little discipline about not splat, just kind of get it just right. And I can put together something that, wasn't obvious, but both of the boxes that I won were very obvious. Like they were just like exactly how you described, Paul. They were just like streamlined on type decks. The second one was really similar to what you described. It was a goblins deck that had everything. It's one of those things where you're just like, oh, perfect. You look at your rares. I had 2 copies of
I'm goblins.
Yeah, of Grub or whatever. And I had Grub's command, so I could just loop those things. And then I also had the immolation. And so it's like, which isn't really maxed out in goblins, but it gets the job done just the same.
Right.
And and I was able to do it. I did have a really exciting, nerve-wracking final. So I was 6-0 and I was rolling. I mean, this deck, it suits my play style with the kind of inevitability factor. And I knew how to play it. And I was really I knew the interactions. I knew Grub getting back command. I knew like when, if I had both Grubs, to just get the other Grub back to have it in case, so that I can continue my loop versus getting the more powerful immediate effect, that type of thing. And I ended up, I lost, at 6-0, and it was one of those things where like they just had like kind of the perfect curve, and it was okay, you took a loss, whatever. And I'm like, but I got this. I'm all, this deck's amazing. It would be a real bummer to lose, but this deck's amazing. And I faced down this really nice Kithkin deck, and it was very streamlined. It was very similar to my build, just on the Kithkin side. And the board got big because what ended up happening is my opponent landed Brigid, and I couldn't kill it. And so every single turn they were just flipping. And, so it's like every other turn there's another 1/1 Kithkin. And then they had the Thoughtweft Imbuer. And so they were able to attack me for 15, 17 damage every single turn, but it was on the ground and it didn't have trample. And occasionally they would find a trampler. And that's what I would have to use my removal spell on instead of the Imbuer, which is what I wanted to kill. They found a flyer at some point, and then I digged it. Okay, find the removal spell, kill it. And so this game became obvious to me that in order for me to break this game open, because at some point they have 12 tokens and all the other Kithkins and stuff, they have huge amount of power and toughness. And my deck's like this grindy deck that I can't outgrind this deck. And I don't have any Mega Bomb that could get through all of that as a creature or whatever. But I did have the immolation, and that would be absolutely perfect. So we get pretty deep into this, and I have already decided that I need to draw it. But 2 things need to happen. One, I need my opponent to not break up my Grub, getting back a Death Toucher, getting back stuff from the yard, sacrificing it or putting Blight on it, getting it back. My card advantage engine was very much rolling. Theirs was too, unfortunately. But I needed them to not interrupt that, and I needed them to not find another flyer or trampler. Mm-hmm. And they kept not doing that. They just kept adding to the board more playable Kithkin, we'll call it. And then they would attack me for 15. I would chump. Eventually I got the 2/3 Death Toucher thing down, and then they just stopped attacking. But the problem is now we're doing library checks. Now it's like, who's going to get decked? And it would be me. So, because I had actually drawn, quite a few more cards. I had an Eclipsed Boggart. I mean, this deck was the nuts. And so I had kind of churned through. But at some point I'm like, okay, I'm going to need to find my one-sided sweeper here to get the job done. So anything that milled me on my side, I'm not doing it. I have to maintain that out. And at some point I needed to play the Eclipse Boggart again, and I did. And every time I'm not even looking at what I'm hitting. I'm just looking at the dark cards to see if the immolation's in there, because I need to know where it's at. And sure enough, on the second one or whatever, it's in that pile. So now I know where it's at. It's in the bottom 3 cards of my library. So I chump with the Boggart just to get it in the graveyard, buy it back again with Grub. so that I can bump that 3 up
Right.
a few. And but then once I get to that point, it's like, okay, now I can't do anything. I just have to draw my card for the turn. No more Boggardine, definitely no mill. But the problem is this took forever. Like it took a long time to find it in the first place. And then it took a long time to kind of bubble it back up to the top of my library. And my opponent could find, I was out of gas. Like they could find I'm just playing creatures. And it's like, that's not really getting the job done for me. Again, they had actually stopped attacking at this point, but, miraculously, I have to say, even after it was probably like over 12 turns of this. Like it was just turn after
I'm
turn
shocked
after
they
turn.
couldn't find a way to kill you.
Same. I was just waiting for them to be like, here's a trampler. And I'm like, cool, I die in 2 turns or I have to put my whole board in front of it or whatever.
Right.
And they didn't. And it was a real, like, it was one of those things where like every top deck that wasn't the card that I needed, I'm just like, my luck has to have run out here. Like it's just, they're not looking for some unique card in the set, right? They're looking for something with flying, right? It's like, yeah, they're Kithkin. There's not that many, but still, like, it wouldn't have taken really anything. But it turns out that their deck, which was excellent, was very low curve based Kithkin.
Low removal,
high Kithkin count, curve, like the kind of decks that we were talking about. They didn't have any major top end in there at all. And so I was able to find it and I wiped literally all but 1 creature and just attacked with everything. And they're just like, yeah, okay. And
was it the imbuer?
It was. It was an 0-1 imbuer. And that looks a little worse than when you have 25 creatures. So anyway, I was able to pick up the win. But like those moments didn't happen that often. Most of the time, the sealed format felt very lopsided. And I have to say, I think I actually enjoyed it. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I think it's a really bad format. Like the way that they set up the color pairs and everything. You know what? The first thing I look for when I play sealed on these generally is how you described it, Paul, which is like kind of what's my mana. That's kind of what I want. I mean, obviously I look at the rares because they put them right in your face, but then I go scroll right. Like what's my lands? What's my colorless? You know, and I kind of sort that out to kind of get an idea for what I might be able to do with the deck. Here, I'm scroll right. How many feisty spikelings and feastlings do I have? I played so many feastlings over because you just needed them. And my eyes got used to going, okay, how many merfolk? I have 7, and then down to shapeshifter. How many of those? I got 5. Okay, actually that's enough. But I just was forced to play all of those all the time. And you know what? Those are kind of boring cards. They're not that interesting.
Yeah. And so just ultimately what ends up happening is just when you get to those big payoff cards, right? The lords or the rares, that's kind of what ends up kind of breaking open the games. And so you just have to try to build your deck around those rares and kind of try to get there. So
and it just didn't work.
Right.
And I had a lot of what you described where I would lose, like I wouldn't even get to gems. Like I wouldn't even get to 3 wins or anything. It was just like 1, 2, 0, 2, just face kicked in.
I had like 4 runs in a row where I got nothing. I'm like, oh, here's another $100.
Okay, we have to hear. You know, we're not really like bad beat story guys on LR. Like me, you, and Luis, we've been through the trenches, right? Like we don't really we don't like to tell them. We don't want to hear them. We get it. It was unlucky. It sucked. Whatever. But you know, there are some of them that are worthy. And you had like a truly epic bad beat happened to you that sent you off the rails. It was incredible.
I mean, this put me on like full blown tilt. So I am 6-0 with a really, really solid goblins deck. You know, a couple of rares. I have a Chronicle of Victory in my deck with, 12-ish goblins and what have you. So just really solid start. I feel like, okay, at 6-0, I have a really good shot at winning this box. And I play against this opponent, and we're going back and forth. They also have a really solid list, but it gets really close, and I get down to like 5 life or something, okay? And we have a fairly even board, and I top deck a Hovel Hurler, which is the 5 mana, 6/7 enters with 2 -1/-1 counters. I can jump things to try to like get extra damage in. But my opponents had a much higher life total, so I have to pick my spots with how I'm going to choose to attack. So I get my opponent to some life total, like 8 or 7, but I'm sitting at 5. So the next turn, if I utilize my Hovel Hurler, I will win. But my opponent makes a super aggressive attack with all their stuff, and I'm one of which is a Flamekin Guildweaver, which is a 4/3 trampler. And I have, at the moment, I believe it was just like a 4 or 5 Hovel Hurler. I'm like, well, I'm at 5 life. Like, just anything can get me here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to block the Flamekin Guildweaver. If they kill the Hovel Hurler, my board is still okay. It's still a 2-for-1. Like, I'll still probably be okay. So you know what? I can live with that if they draw. And by the way, my opponent's empty-handed. So I block, and I have the win the next turn. They rip Anti-Sentence. -2/-2, kill the Hovel Hurler. I'm like, oh god, that sucks. But it's okay. It's okay. Like I still feel like I'm slightly ahead on this board, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a Gathering Stone going as well.
So the longer the game goes, theoretically, it would benefit you anyway.
Right. Mm-hmm. Or I drew Gathering Stone, sorry. And I play it for the turn. Top card of my library, Chronicle of Victory.
Whew.
I'm like, all right, lock it in. I have 3, I have 3 creatures in play or something. If I slam this, I will win the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my opponent, will just definitively lose. They cast their last card, which was a removal spell that they needed to kill my Hovel Hurler.
To not just die anyway. Yeah.
Do not just die instantly. And they have 2 elementals in play or something like that. I'm like, whatever. Okay, but it's okay. I'm going to slam Chronicle with Gathering Stone going. It's going to be so hard to lose from this spot. My opponent has... maybe some of you people who are aware, they have 7 mana available. I will just let you know that they have 7 mana available. They draw their card for the turn. All 7 mana becomes tapped, and I'm like, please do not be the card that I think you're casting. Dream Harvest is what they drew off the top. With exactly 7 mana and no cards in hand. So they cast Dream Harvest, steal my Chronicle, and kill me. Like literally over 2 turns, I have to jump block. With my own Chronicle. I think if they had drawn their own Chronicle, I might have still been okay. No, I still probably would have died. But the fact that they stole my Chronicle off of the Dream Harvest to kill me was just unbelievable. So they had to go back-to-back good draws. I mean, one was an incredible draw to actually win. So at that point, I'm like, all right, whatever. My deck is still awesome. I'm 6-1. Let's do this. And then the very next game, my opponent goes, I think it was turn 1, Figure of Fable on the play. Turn 2, activate, play Dawnhand Dissident. Turn 3, they play another 3 mana, really solid creature, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just what is happening here? So I'm like, okay, well, I just need to make aggressive plays. So I attack with a combat trick ready to go with my creature because I'm like, I need to make something happen. They have 2 unbeatable rares in play. Let's go. And I attack. They block. I use my combat trick, and they have 3 creatures in play because they went 1 drop, 1 drop, 2 drop. Protective Response, my creature.
Oh my god!
And at that point, I'm just dead. And so I ended up bubbling out at 6-0, thinking. I mean, I was literally 2 turns away from just winning the box, and they went draw into losing to that, and I was just completely off my rocker, if you will.
Yeah.
And I instantly joined another queue, and I have another great Goblins deck, and I'm winning. And Monty hears me on the side. I am just the entire time just grumbling, muttering under my breath because I got a box physically stolen from me. And he's like, Paul, I've never heard somebody slam the trackpad as hard as you are right now.
He did say that.
Because I'm on a laptop, so I'm just literally doing this. And I did manage to win a box with in the next one.
Vengeance.
So I was able to reset. But I'm still feeling the pain of that loss.
That was incredible. And there's subtext here too. Dream Harvest is horrible.
Right.
Even in sealed, it's just bad. In a format where everybody's trying to be how many elves can I put into my deck? This is not a bomby, the card that your opponent hits one of the best possible hits,
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's about as good as a feisty Spikeling for those of you who think it's a bomb. So just kind of,
yeah. I mean, I almost guarantee it's just worse,
right.
Let me look.
It's right next to it. They're literally right next to each other here.
Okay. Yeah. Dream Harvest game in hand win rate is 50.8%. And by the way, this is of the multicolored rares, that's just because of the filter I did. Of the ones that have a significant enough sample size to put a percentage on it, which there's only one that doesn't, which is rating schemes. Of all the rest, it's the worst. like all the
Not
commands.
surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, when I first read the card, I'm like, this is probably a card that Luis is really going to like.
Oh, I like
You know
it.
what I mean?
I like it,
Yeah,
but
well,
it's
yeah,
just
but
terrible.
I'm just like, because I feel like I'm generally more pessimistic about cards, so I kind of go,
Well,
hey,
Luis
you're going
is
to
an
have to beat me with,
optimist. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm like, you're going to kind of have to beat me with this, because I'm just like thinking about the fail case of this card. I'm like, oh, you spend 7 mana, hit like two of my, like a 2-drop and a 3-drop, like I guess that's okay,
Right.
or like you hit my 5-drop creature, you spent 7 mana, so. But when you hit a Chronicle of Victory, that's when you're like, I'm a genius. And
your opponent obviously was. Yeah, that was unreal.
Yes, that was insane.
But we've got a little bit of time left, Paul. I wanted to get your big picture take on the format. Just, what are you liking? What decks are you drafting? Do you like the format in general? What's your take on it? Just kind of wanted to get your, this is where I am at now with the format.
Yeah, I think kind of for the limitations that were imposed on this format, which was, of course, a format that's really leaning into 5 major kindred types, having satisfying payoffs for those kindred types, and having the mechanics of all the kindred types work, I think they were successful. Like all the color pairs feel unique. They all still, when you're doing the thing, like I've lost to a plenty of good goblins decks, right? Just because they're the worst performing deck, you can still put together good goblins decks. So I feel like they did a really good job of just like playing to the archetypes, and a good elf deck, good merfolk deck. Whenever you win and you're doing the convoke thing, you're recurring a bunch of stuff from the graveyard, you're beating down with Kithkin. It all feels very satisfying and exactly what it's trying to do. My reservations for the format was, just literally right at the get-go, was you only can still just draft 5 archetypes. Now, there's going to be a bunch of hipsters out there going, what are you talking about, Paul? I had a sick red-white giant stack.
Yeah.
Oh, man, you don't understand. Black-white tree folk are the truth. And you know what? If you can pull it off, fine. Like, I think, yes, you can put together a functional draft deck in white-black, right, with whatever you want, if you have Reaping Willows and stuff, but you're just significantly handicapping yourself because you just don't get access to all the kindred payoffs that exist. And there's so many of them, right? Every single kindred pair has 6 or 7 signpost uncommons, right? Like Creekwood Safe Right, Moorkent's Loyalist, Moorkent's Eyes. They're just, it just goes on. And by not playing into those, you're handicapping yourself. So I really do think there are 5 major ones that you want to play. Now, Pro Tour drafts are different, I will say. Maybe we can touch on that a little bit later. But for the most part, this is a format where you have kind of the 5 main types, and then every now and then you can do like the Vivid Elementals, a fun deck, right? Where you're just taking a bunch of Changing Wayfinders and Evolving Wilds and Foraging Wickermaws and Land Cyclers and trying to make something work, which I think is still fine. I still think those decks are going to be generally weaker than an on-the-rails Kindred color pair that happens to be open. Now, in a more competitive environment, that might not be the case, where digging deep and trying to draft some of these other archetypes are more viable. But for me, I've just still generally had the most success leading into the kindred types. Goblins is the deck that I draft least often. Funny enough, Goblins is the archetype that I've won the most collector boxes off in sealed. So like a really good Goblins deck is awesome. You just have to make sure it's not contested. That's the problem. With Goblins is just the depth, right? Where I think Elves can support, if the right cards are open, you can probably support 3 drafters at a table, whereas Goblins, you kind of want to be 1, maybe 2 if the person is like all the way on the other side, but you still have to run a little bit hot to kind of make it work. So, I knew just kind of going in, probably the first 20-ish drafts would still be fun, and I think they were, right? But I think over time, things will fall off just because you don't get as many unique draft experiences. After you've drafted Elves 5 times, Kithkin 4 times, Merfolk 5 times. Like after you've done it, you're just like, oh, it's another Elf deck, it's another Merfolk deck. So I feel like the replayability is definitely lowered here because you can't. You can, but you can't. You know what I mean? You can, but you really can't play the other types. Whereas even compare it to something like Bloomburrow, which it was a set that cared a lot about creature types, but you could still draft all 10 of the color pairs, right? Like you could put it together, and they made a lot of like nice cards that kind of play into multiple archetypes. That's not necessarily the case here. It's like you are leaning into your kindred type, and that was like, you can tell that was definitely their goal. And on that axis, I think they succeeded. Again, I still have fun playing the things that my deck is doing. I like playing elves and grinding, cracking my Morkan size, making a million tokens. I like convoking out and playing a Merfolk Lord. Like, it's all fun and satisfying. But I feel like, again, there's just less archetypes to explore.
Does it make you nervous for the long-term prospects on the set? I mean, you know, the PT's over, the first Winnabox is done. We still got a long stretch with this set as kind of the main thing. Like, you know, my litmus test is, especially nowadays on Arena, is like, when's that cube coming back? When's that vintage? You know, like, and right. Like, if I start thinking about that, that's a sign that, like, you know, maybe I'm feeling like I've kind of explored the format, you know, and I don't feel that way yet, to be clear. No. Not right. Yet. I still really want to try to nail this Vivid deck. I think it's a offshoot of Elementals, and, you know, there's some cool stuff, and I think that's going to kind of carry me for a while. But, like, I am very skeptical that in another month I'm going to be like, let's fire up another Lorwyn draft. I can't wait to jump in. Like, I'm nervous about that.
Yeah. Well, because there are so many sets there. I think, look here, I got my, Teenage Mutant Ninja Access is 3 weeks away.
Yeah.
3 weeks away. I feel like still, people are psychos like us drafting, you know, we got 25 drafts at this point, where I feel like most people maybe got like 10. So, you know, I think even if a set is somewhat, you know, for the average person, they're like, it's still going to carry them for a little month. And because TMNT is so close, right? It's just, it's not that far away. I feel like it's going to be okay. Now, for example, Avatar was actually around for a really long time, right? Like it lasted through the winter, or like through December. So at that point, yes, there was kind of a drop off. Now, Avatar, you could do a lot of things, so it was fine. But we don't have that as much here. I feel like this set's only going to be out for like 5 or 6 weeks before we already start looking into the next set. So not as big of a concern for this, but yes, I would be really concerned if the next limited set was 3 months away and not early access in 3 weeks.
No, that's a great point. We are in a different world now. You know, if for those that don't keep up on the MTG news, you know, we have 7 sets coming out this year, 4 of which are Universes Beyond, I think. And I'm kind of sit back and wait, you know, kind of a approach to this stuff, because my knee-jerk reaction is, well, that's just too many, you know. But, you know, there is something kind of cool about having a new set coming out on, you know, for limited, and kind of keeping things fresh all the time. Like, I don't know, unless the format's like really, really good, like, yeah, I can move on and, you know, try a different thing, and that's cool. The thing that I want to know is just that, like, I always think in terms, like, for the podcast and stuff, and for our viewers and listeners, is like, what's the set right now, right? Like, because they come out with so many products. Like, this isn't the first year that they've come out with a whole bunch of products, but it's like, where does the Eye of Sauron point, right? Is it like, right now it's very clearly at Lorwyn Eclipsed, right? But it's like, are all 7 of these going to be like that? Like the main thing on Arena, a full, you know, the premier, you know, queue is going to be that set, and it's going to be up for a period of time, and you're going to have a chance to kind of get to know it, you know, or is it going to feel more like something remastered, where it's like kind of a little off to the side and there's a thing here, or you can keep playing the other set, and they kind of don't make it like, here you go, right? This is what we're doing, you know, and I'm really wondering how that vibes out. And then also, you know, we had the Spider-Man debacle last year where it felt like they wanted us to draft that, but nobody did. And then they kind of quickly put up other stuff, you know, hey, remember Final Fantasy? You guys like that, right? Here you go. You know, and it was like, yeah, we do. Thank you. And, you know, I wonder how that's going to vibe.
I mean, Spider-Man, I think, just had a variety of issues. I just don't know that it was completely fully developed. Additionally, I think the format was curated for pick 2 draft. I just don't think that that's necessary. You just make a format and you can have anybody draft pick 2. I've actually had people that said they don't actually mind drafting pick 2 in the current set. That's actually an option on Arena, because it's like, all right, everybody, let's hold hands. Okay. like we're gonna plant our flags. This is my kindred type, right? You have kind of you have
Right.
4 people, so everybody just kind of plants their flag, figures out what's open, and they actually thought it was a fairly smooth drafting experience.
That's
So
cool.
I
That
just
actually
don't think
makes
any
sense.
set needs
Yeah.
to be. Yeah, I just don't think any set needs to be designed for that, and I think that's probably another thing that made that set worse. I would be surprised if we have another set like Spider-Man. I would hope not. And I think a lot of these other upcoming sets will be a little more developed than what we saw from Spider-Man.
Do you like this format?
I think again, it's weird because I feel like we played a lot this last weekend, but it's been out for what?
Just
almost 3 weeks? Yeah, just a
no,
little
no.
bit.
I mean, because it came out on Tuesday, and then the next Friday, you and I were in the booth commentating the Pro Tour.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
that turnaround time was really quick. Now we're a
Really
Friday past that. So yeah, two and a half, 3.
I will say, I mean, the cards themselves are fun to play. I think the uncommons, a lot of them are just fun cards to play, which, I don't know. It's like you got to quantify that in some way, but it's just like, oh yeah, this is sweet. I feel like I'm doing something powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, even if it's removing a -1/-1 counter from my Creekwood Safe Right, it's like, I'm doing it. I am doing the elf thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it's just like, oh, Gathering Stone, I hit my elemental right away. Let's go. So just a lot of those little things. So I have been having fun with in that aspect. So, but again, the format hasn't been out super long time. Maybe there will be a point where I just go, oh, it's another, one of these things. But I will say, actually, I was having a little bit less fun earlier on once like a handful of people, like especially in Mythic ranks, it gets really weird where everybody knows what the right thing to be doing is. It's kind of like, I remember when Luis hit rank 1 with blue-black zombies.
Yeah.
Basically, everybody in Mythic was just drafting the exact same deck.
Right.
So it was just actually not fun because all your opponents were just doing the exact same thing. So it was actually a little bit less fun in the beginning, but now it's like everybody kind of knows how to draft these archetypes, and it actually makes the drafting experience a little more balanced. And then you have a wider breadth of decks that you can play against, which I think is actually better. So right now, I have been having fun. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the most fun set that I play, just because when you slash the number of archetypes in half, that leads to just, sometimes I've had drafts where it's not even clear which lane I'm supposed to be in. And those are the worst, right? Where it's just like, I am not getting any signals. Like, I do not know what creature type I need to be. This is tough. I have nothing. Everybody's just taking all the good cards. And then you have those train wrecks. But I feel like you see those a lot more at the Pro Tour than you see in your typical paper draft or something online, where, on the Pro Tour, everybody is taking all the good cards. Everybody's scrapping. And those are the instances where I think you can perhaps branch out a little bit more into the off-color types, right? Mm-hmm. You're not going to get the nuts elf deck with all the fixins. You're just not.
Right.
There's going to be 2 other elf drafters. Look at Seth Manfield.
Yep.
He had 3 green drafters to his right. It was very clear that it was being cut off, but he was like, you know what? Blinders on, let's do it. I'm forcing elves, right? Which certain people are going to do. Seth is a very experienced drafter, but even inexperienced drafters, they just know what the best thing is. They took a bomb and they're just going to move in, right? So that's when you try to get a little creative. You're like, all right, at this point, it's a Pro Tour draft. I'm going to just take random draw. That's where card draw matters more. Games get a lot scrappier. People aren't just beating you down and curving out. And we saw some really weird decks get 3-0 even at the Pro Tour, where we had that green-white mid-range deck, right? It wasn't even a Kithkin deck that got the trophy, where it was a Snake. Where he beat Daniel Getchell with just like a green-white go big deck. And it was just like the game kind of got grindy. It kind of went long. He just kept playing a bunch of haymakers, and it kind of got the job done. And yeah, that will happen when you have kind of a pool or a pod with a lot more experienced drafters. And in those instances, then you can maybe draft a black-white Treefolk deck.
Yeah, that's actually my biggest concern at this point for the format is we always talk about draft being self-correcting, and it feels like this format has very limited tools to self-correct. Like normally you would say, okay, I'm going to draft black white. I'm going against the grain. Nobody's going to see this coming. There's enough powerful in that case Treefolk payoffs, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to find this very narrow lane and I'm going to hit it. And it has been really difficult to justify that. They do not come together. There's not enough meat on the bone to support even one drafter in any of those sub archetypes with any type of consistency at all. Like, it's one of those things where if I came to you and said, okay, Paul, you are the only red, white, black, white, blue, black drafter at the table. Like, I can lock that in for you before the draft starts. So, go nuts. You'd be like, I might not want to do that. Like, the deck I'm going to end up with, if I'm very lucky, is going to be at best on par with the actual archetypes. And it's hard to imagine. It really is hard to imagine you drafting black, white, and then taking a player who said, like, I have a good elves deck, not like the nut, but like, I got a good rare. I got a couple of the uncommons. I got a good curve. Like, they're going to lay out that deck and you're going to go, I'd rather just have that. Like,
right.
And that just makes it difficult because, even in a format where all of the 10 pairs are viable, it can be difficult for it to accommodate a very powerful deck. This feels just like the top half is just crushing the bottom half. And I don't really see how I don't really see a viable way for that to happen.
I agree. I think for the most part, just avoiding those other creature types entirely is kind of the way to go, unless it's like super clear, right? If you're tabling, if you have some black cards and some red cards, and then you table a Reaping Willow or something, and then you get a really late Moonlit Lamenter, yes, that's like the start of something you can make happen. I think a lot of it often comes down to either, you open a black rare, you open a white rare, and then you get a Reaping Willow, and you're like, all right, let's put something together. But you're not just taking Scarbleed Scouts and Spiral into Solitudes and going, all right, let's grind them out with some, with like my black-white deck with an okay curve and some removal.
Yeah, I think the takeaway for me is, and I was thinking about this, like maybe for the Sunset show, like we try to sum up the set in a sentence, and I was thinking like they aimed low and hit their target. Right? Like they only went for 5 archetypes. They went for onboard creature. They went for the most basic type of archetype for limited, which is creature type based. But they nailed it. Like the 5 that they got are all interesting and good. And like, that's cool. And I do think that as one thing I always think about when a set comes out is how is this for a new player? Right. And like, when I saw Final Fantasy, I'm just like, well, we're just never getting any new drafters, right? There's just millions of word of text. And like you and I are like, hell yeah, this is great. But like, man, can you imagine if your first draft format was Final Fantasy? It just would be so overwhelming. It'd be like playing a game of Commander. It's just like there's so much stuff going on. It's just hard to track it all, right? If you're new, and I mean, even for me, the games of Commander I played, I've had a hard time tracking it. And while I prefer that in a draft format personally, I always think about the new players, given the show and stuff, we want to have people discovering the joys of limited as we go. And I'm just like, I don't know how you could, with Final Fantasy, but like with this set, oh yeah, definitely. Right. It's just like,
it's fantastic for new players. I mean, literally the uncommons tell you Eclipse Kithkin. Play green-white and put Kithkin in your deck, and you'll have a good time, right?
Yeah, and exactly like Eclipse Elf. It's like it's free to cast mana color-wise in this deck, and it's impossible in all the others. What do you want to do? Right.
And you're always going to get a card. It's card advantage.
Right.
It kind of does everything you want. And just kind of as a note, I know a lot of the viewers here are super dedicated, devoted fans of limited, but just in terms of the performance of my videos on my channel, like I am getting generally a few more views in this set than I have some of the other sets. And I think it's because perhaps it's a little more welcoming. Maybe people, maybe there's some nostalgia also attached to Lorwyn, which is why Fairy should have been awesome. And perhaps it's just easier to pick up, right? You just kind of play the set. I'm gonna do this thing. I want to learn, and this one doesn't look like an intimidating set for me to start kind of learning, and I want to get in. Foundations was another set that did fairly well for me, and that's also a set where they literally aimed low, right? They wanted the gameplay to be a little more simple for newer players to kind of appreciate and enjoy, and I think this is certainly a more complicated set than Foundations, but still, there's only 5 things you can be doing for the most part. And so if you're new to draft, you're like, okay, find my lane, have some fun.
So I think that's a win. I think that's an important and maybe one that it would be harder to see for our more experienced drafters. So, there's definitely something to be said for the set. Paul, thanks so much for taking the time to hang out with us today. We love to have you on. We're aiming to have you on once per set cycle, but it's like we're trying to figure out where to fit you in.
7 times this year, Marshall.
Yeah, it's a lot of shows, buddy. Yeah, you better buckle up. Where can people find you? Where can people find your channel? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I do daily limited content. Usually it's for the latest set, unless of course we have some cube coming out. And you'll find that on my YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/@haumph. HAUMPH. And just daily draft videos I will post there. If you want to learn a little bit on top of, all the great stuff you get here, then I think it's just nice to be able to follow somebody. Kind of my goal with the channel is to teach and educate while I play. And, you'll see the occasional outburst here and there.
Yeah. I'll put a link. I'll put a link to your channel down below. I mean, everybody knows, that listens, but it's good for anybody who hasn't checked out Paul's channel yet. He really does hit kind of a unique combination of entertainment, high level play, right? Like Paul's top tier limited player. So that, goes a long way because it means you can actually learn, but also Paul takes the time to really explain his thought process. So, if you're there just to hang out with Paul for the morning while you eat your cereal, great. It'll check that box. If you're working on your limited game and you want to see how a top tier player evaluates and approaches game states, draft picks and all that, you get that 100% as well. And then of course you get kind of the most up-to-date stuff on what people are drafting in a given format, because he does daily videos. So they're very timely as well. I can't recommend them highly enough. And thanks again, Paul, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. We also appreciate our patrons for supporting us. Thank you for that. And Ultimate Guard for their support of the show. If you want to find everything related to LR, you can go to lrcast.com. There's a page of links on the front page that has links to kind of all of our stuff. And then, of course, it has all the episodes and everything as well that we've actually ever done, which is kind of wild. And then incidentally, Paul's YouTube channel is also on that too. So that's another place you can go to find a link to Paul's channel if you want to check out his videos. That will do it for this one. We'll see you next week. Paul, sign off wise, what was the best food we had in Richmond? It used to be like kind of a low key, really good food city, but it's kind of fallen off. Like some of our favorite restaurants have closed. And one of them is apparently being operated under some like illegal licensing agreement or something. Like right. We went to a restaurant that we really like there, and the food was like way worse, like noticeably like what happened here kind of, but everything else was the same. And we looked up their website and for that location, they just have this disclaimer that says this site is operating without a licensing agreement. And we're trying to get them to stop, but they won't. And we can't guarantee anything there. So it's like, yeah. What was your favorite food that we had?
Yeah, I think our food experience this time around was a little disappointing overall. Mm-hmm. I think part of it was because it was so cold in Richmond, because that big cold storm just kind of blew by that entire East Coast area. And so we were not really interested in traveling to any place to go eat, right? Like we didn't take any cabs to go eat some of the food. So we were kind of just stuck with what was kind of around us. I think for me, I guess the best place was probably the pizza place. We went to, the wood. It was like a wood fired, like it had a wood fire oven, like a brick oven, and you just got to order pizza. And for Marshall and I, that was our fourth meal of the day, and it was the best one. It was the best one for the day. But yeah, we had some pizza there. I got a nice pizza with a little guanciale and some other types of cheese, and it was fine. But yeah, outside of that, everything was. There's a bunch of like bars with like a bunch of fried bar food that was just okay. And I guess we had coverage dinner that was also fine, but we always go to some place kind of fancy for those. Yeah,
it's kind of a steak chop place, but whatever.
Yeah.
We'll revisit Richmond again, and maybe the restaurant scene will have resurrected itself.
I'm going back in 2 months, but hopefully the weather gets better. I'm going to be doing the SCG con there, or an SCG event. So hopefully, like it's not 20 degrees outside, and I
Yeah.
can actually I'm a fair weather person, so I can't really handle the harsh cold of the East Coast. And I know it's colder in Chicago and all those other places. Don't worry, I'm going to be in Milwaukee in like 2 or 3 weeks, so I will experience the cold firsthand.